Hello everyone and welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're doing good and well. So it's time for another episode of Symphonic Sundays, and this time I'm going it alone to do a ranking challenge. And as voted for by you in the recent poll I did, you wanted to see me do a Kamelot album ranking, and I've got 13 studio albums to rank from my least favourite to my favourite. In fact, in that poll it wasn't even close. Kamelot were by far the winners of that poll, and I still intend to do rankings for the other bands at some point, but obviously as this band was clearly very popular choices, so a very popular choice, so I decided, you know what, let's do this next for Symphonic Sundays. So Kamelot, if you don't know them, they were formed in 1987 by Thomas Youngblood. They have 13 studio albums to their name, which I'm going to be ranking from my least favourite to my favourite here. They have had some changes in lineup over the years. Thomas Youngblood is the sort of constant of Kamelot, I would say. You have had obviously the changes in singers. You've gone from Mark Vanderbilt to begin with, then to Roy Khan, and then of course to Tommy Karavik, who is the current singer with the band. So anyway, without any further ado, you know how this works. I will start with my number 13 here, my least favourite album, which is Siege Perilous, the first album to feature Roy Khan on vocals. This came out back in 1998, and I don't think this is a bad album. It's just my least favourite. It's just less to my taste, I suppose, and also it's before Kamelot really hit their stride with those classic albums, the ones basically that came after this. Without wanting to give too much away about how I'm going to rank these albums, this was just an album which I felt really showed that they were in a transitional phase, finding their feet with new singer Roy Khan, and even Roy doesn't sound quite like he was yet to sound on the later albums. So that's why Siege Perilous is my number 13 at my least favourite Kamelot album. I do like tracks like Riding on here actually, and Once a Dream and Iria as three of my favourite tracks from that album. Coming up next at number 12 is the debut album from the band called Eternity. This came out in 1995. This was, of course, the album which featured Mark Vanderbilt on vocals, and he sounds quite a lot like Jeff Tate, I feel. They definitely have that late 1980s sound to them, and they don't yet sound really like Kamelot. I think that's kind of a bit of a problem with this album, a bit of a problem with the first couple of albums, with that they just don't have that Kamelot sound. They're not yet in that Kamelot prime that they would have, rather like as with the case with Siege Perilous. And that's not to say this is a bad album. I do think some of the songs are kind of basic on here, but I still think they're pretty catchy. There's some good hooks on this album, and yeah, that's I guess why it's number 12. My favourite tracks are Eternity, Call of the Sea and Warbird. Coming up next at number 11 is the most recent album from the band, The Awakening, and this is a Tommy Karavik album, and it's pretty low down. I'll admit that. I mean, I do think for me that Kamelot on this album, they just sound a bit like, to me it just sounded quite familiar. A lot of the songs here, like you could start, like dare I say, I mean, Kamelot are rarely predictable for me. They're very rarely predictable, but there were times on here I felt they were leaning into predictable territory. And that's rare for me to think. Now, what I will say in defence of this album is that this is an album that I've probably had the least time with out of all of these. And it is their most recent one too. So Kamelot albums, they tend to grow on you over time. And there's still a chance that this album will yet grow on me. They're kind of like vines that are growing around you and gradually wrapping themselves around you. That's the effect for me of Kamelot's songs and Kamelot's music generally. And it could be the case, therefore, this album still grows on me. So do keep that in mind. But for me, The Awakening is one of my less preferred Kamelot albums to go to at the moment. So that's why it's my number 11. I do enjoy The Great Divide. I do enjoy Opus of the Night and Willow as well. Coming at number 10 is another Tommy album. It's Silverthorn from 2012. Lots of guest spots on this album. Lots of really good guest spots as well. I do think this is a really good album. And I think there's now a pretty big jump in quality here, or at least in my opinion, I think that all the albums from this point on are all great, this one included. Silverthorn is a great album, don't get me wrong, and a great way for Tommy to start with the band. It's starting to show the band moving full symphonic, big, bombastic, great sound, amazing. Tommy's vocals are kind of a little bit romantic to me, in a way, the way he sings. But I like that, and I really enjoy Sacrimony on here, Veritas, Solitaires, and Sacrimony is actually a great opening track to this album. Love it. So we move on now to my number 9, which is the band's second album. This is Dominion from 1997, the second one with Mark Vanderbilt. And I think I I really like this album. I think this is a dark horse in this band's entire discography. There's some really great songs on here. To name three: Heaven, We Are Not Separate, and Troubled Mind. And I feel like they've got that sound of the first album still here, but it just felt the songs just felt a bit more impactful to me when I was listening to it. The production's still not particularly good. It's still in that early era, those 90s albums from Kamelot. I think the production's never that great on those albums. But it's still a really solid album, really, really good. Definitely a dark horse from Kamelot that came out. Their second album from 97, Dominion. Next up at number 8, we have got maybe the most controversial ranking here. That's because I've put The Fourth Legacy at number 8, and I know that's probably going to stir up some discontent in the comments. Right, here's the thing, it's just not really to my taste. It's definitely a classic Kamelot album. It's definitely one I can appreciate and one I can still enjoy listening to. I think it's a great album, front to back, pretty much. The thing for me is there's something about the style of songs on here, maybe. There's not the kind of hooks from the bands that I really like. It's not got that kind of, the big sound that I generally, I guess, or the heaviness maybe that I gravitate towards. It's definitely got a fast pace to it. It's very up-tempo, but it's just less for me. And that's why The Fourth Legacy controversially comes in at number 8. But I do really enjoy tracks like Until Kingdom Come, Shadow of Uther, the title track. It's a really, really strong album. But it's just slightly less for me, and there are 7 albums from this band I think I slightly prefer. Coming in next at number 7 is Ghost Opera from 2007. I think this is Roy's last albums are kind of also, I use the word underrated. Probably I'll use it quite a lot in this video, but I do think Ghost Opera is one of those underrated kind of Kamelot albums. It's where you can see the band sort of laying the way for that kind of future Tommy era as well. I feel like the sound's starting to go into this slightly more stage musical like direction almost with the style. The sounds become a little bit more open, a little bit less kind of crazy and crowded with the power metal stuff. And you can start to hear that here. I really enjoy tracks like Ghost Opera, Morning Star, and Eden Echo on this one. Sort of towards the end of the album, I find I like the album as it goes on more and more. So that's my choice for number 7, Ghost Opera. Coming in at number 6, we've got The Shadow Theory. I think this is a great Tommy album. I think this is a really fantastic Tommy album. It's heavy. It's kind of got a progressive type of sound to it. Love the guest vocal spots again. I love the song that features Jennifer Haben on this one actually. Also really like Phantom Divine, the opening song, Burns to Embrace, Vesper Time, My Crimson Bride's another great song. Just a great album from that later era, and one of my favourites certainly from the Tommy Karavik era. But there's still one Tommy album I like just that bit more. Coming in next at number 5 is effectively, I think this is the Roy Khan Swan Song album. This is Poetry for the Poison. Here I go again. I'm going to say it again. It's another underrated Kamelot album. It's kind of gothic. It's a little bit industrial even in a few spots. I adore the song that features Simone Simons on here, House on the Hill. Absolutely epic track with superb vocals from both Roy and Simone. And that's what I love. I love the gothic side. I love that it's a bit darker. It's got a shade of darkness, this album. It's surrounded in a bit of a darker tone, and I really like that. That's slightly more my thing. I love the gothic aspects of this record. That's why I like it so much. That's why it's as high as it is at number 5. That is Poetry for the Poisoned from 2010. Now coming in at number 4, maybe this is another slightly controversial take, that it's not my number 1 or 2 or even 3. That's Epica. That's Epica. Now the reason that it's not higher, I love this album to bits. It even hurts me maybe a touch that it's not a bit higher, this one, because I do think it's an absolutely brilliant album with some massive, massive Kamelot tracks on that I love. But it's the interludes for me that break up the album's momentum for me personally. I find the tracks slightly frustrating. Now for some people you might say they fit with the context and the overall album okay, and the flow of the album. I sort of see that, but at the same time it's not my kind of thing. I like my album to deliver song to song, just keep you know, particularly this kind of metal, power metal and symphonic metal, I just want it to keep delivering and not to have too many breaks or too many interludes to distract me from the sort of, you know, or slow down the momentum and the pace of the album. I just find with Epica that just happens to me a little bit. But I love songs like The Edge of Paradise, A Feast for the Vain, Lost and Damned. You know, it doesn't get much better than that, really. But anyway, there are 3 albums. I do like that bit more than even Epica. Would you believe it? My number 3 is Tommy Karavic's era album, and it's Haven. It's from 2015. And this is an absolutely brilliant album, and it's as high as this. I think it's the best for me from Tommy's era. It is just, it's got the bombast, it's got the symphonic sound, but everything there's a lot of great hooks here. You know, it takes me a little while for some of these songs to wrap around you and to kind of get under your skin. But when they do, you really, really love it. And, you know, there's so many really great songs in here, from the opening track right through to your album closer. The opening track, Falling Star, Under Grey Skies, featuring Charlotte Vessels of Delane. Also, Liar Liar as well. I should say Charlotte Vessels, formerly of Delane now, actually, shouldn't I? But yeah, you've got Liar Liar, which features Alyssa White Gloss. You know, there's lots of those kind of guest vocal spots that are happening in this period of Kamelot, but they all seem to work incredibly well. I don't think there's a guest vocal song that I don't really like from Kamelot. They always seem to manage to make the guest vocals work really well. Coming in next, and it's the runner-up, it's number 2. And number 2 is The Black Halo. This is an absolutely, you know, masterpiece of a power metal album from the band. It's kind of heavy, it's got some great riffage, it's great songwriting, got everything you could want from a Kamelot album. And there's just one album I just love, just maybe there's just nothing in it really. I actually had The Black Halo as my number 1 at one point. It's switched around, you know, these albums at the very top here, really difficult to decide on which is my ultimate favourite. But there's just one album I think I love that bit more. And it's purely down to the songs that are on the album. There's a couple of songs that I just love so much on the next album. That's probably why it's beaten The Black Halo. I know this is the band's most popular album, I think, across the board. It does boast songs like The Haunting, Abandoned, the title track. Those 3 songs are probably my favourites from The Black Halo. It's a truly great album. It deserves the credit it gets, but it's not quite my personal number 1 album from this great band. Because my number 1 album is Karma from 2001. And I don't know, this is from the classic era, the Roy era of the band, the classic power metal sound that is very, very much present here. Yet, you know, I don't know if this would be many people's number 1s from that era, but it's just mine. I think it's absolutely just blistering. It's got some blistering tracks on here. It just has those choruses. There's a particular song on this album which I really love, and it's the title track. And you know, it's the part of the song, it's the chorus when Roy sings the first line of that chorus. You know, who will trade his karma for my kingdom? It just sounds so fantastic, particularly the last time he does it. It's just goosebumps inducing stuff. And you get the spell on here, you get Elizabeth 1 to 3, which, you know, I really enjoy that sort of 3-part song, a 3-part track towards the end. And it's just a masterpiece of an album for me. You know, these guys, you know, it's almost a flawless discography, actually. I mean, the bottom 2 or 3 albums on this list are maybe, for me, they're good, but the top 10 Kamelot albums here are pretty fantastic, and I highly recommend, if you gravitate towards power metal and symphonic metal, that you don't miss out. And if you don't know Kamelot, that you don't miss out, and you check out this band's great albums. Anyway, from me, don't forget to drop a like and a sub if you enjoyed this video. I do a lot of I'm doing Symphonic Sundays and continuing this series at the moment. There will be more album rankings and interviews to come. Otherwise, from me, until next time on Symphonic Sundays at least, it's bye for now.